How big is the investment that you spent to sustainable R&D?
I think when we look at our ESG and our climate control and our emissions programs and governance, ever since we have obtained our concessions in 2001 and 2003, we have been investing substantial sums in these. Sustainability forms a very major part of our annual expenditure. And if we are looking at the last 30 years, I would say that we would have spent at least about $150 to $200 million, if not more, on these areas. And we are willing to do far more if we can find the right area to invest that in. And we are looking at our coal downstream projects, and we are looking at some of the non-coal projects that we are under discussion. And definitely, we will be looking at sustainability as a major platform to be included in the projects, and these projects can be substantial in terms of value.
Did you see anything interesting from all the energy sources from R&D?
Well, we are looking at carbon capture, utilization, and storage, definitely. We are trying to see, what kind of technologies can work for us. But I personally feel that there should be earmarking of R&D expenditure to burn coal cleaner, particularly in areas like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, to somehow see how the technology can be workable at a much cheaper cost. Unfortunately, over the last 2 decades, even though it was essential and it was advocated by IEA in early 2000s, it was lost sight of in the following decade. And I feel that now is the time to actually look very seriously at investing in these things, because as a country, we have major resource in coal. It can last us easily for 50 years, if not more. And we definitely need to maximize the utilization of our assets that we have. And if somehow we can capture carbon at a cheaper cost, it will be beneficial not only for the sector, it will be beneficial for the country.
But how do you see the target for zero emission in Indonesia?
Well, it's going to happen. It's very difficult to be super precise on these numbers, but I think 2060 is a safe platform. It leaves about 35 years, 36 years for a gradual transition. So as I've said before, that actually whether it is biomass, whether it is wind, whether it is solar, whether it is renewables, whether it is fossil fuels, they all need to coexist and grow together. And they can do that until such time either the resources are depleted or there is a workable alternative where you can move away from fossil fuels. Now, the way I have heard it is that oil and gas is likely to last for the next 30 years, so you will need a replacement anyway. And economic coal to be mined can last for another 50 years or 60 years, after which we'll have to look at alternatives anyway. And it'll take another hundreds of millions of years, to get oil and gas and coal back. So I feel the practical way would be to try and look at ways on how to prolong the life cheaper in a healthier way, keeping emissions and other factors, in mind. But let me also just end by saying it is not only fossil fuels which emit coal or which emit carbon. There are a host of other factors which also need to be looked at. So I think it's a little unfair for the total attention to be fully on coal or fully on fossil fuels.
What that you think will make it fair to reduce emissions, not just in our country, but also in the world?
I think per capita, looking at per capita emissions is the way to go, where each individual becomes responsible for how much he emits or she emits. Now, I recall in the B20 summit in Bali a year or two ago, there was a chart that I saw, which talked about per capita emissions country-wise. And I was surprised that the per capita emissions from a factor of 30 or 40, if I recall correctly, at the top, actually dropped to below 1 in certain poorer nations. So we had the most developed countries at a level of around a factor of 16. We had Indonesia, around 2 or 2.5, and we had India, which was even lower than that. And the global average seemed to be around 7 or 8. So I feel there should be a global standard set for per capita emissions. And the developing world should not be penalized on its prosperity at this point of time. It will still allow them room to grow in a cleaner way. But the way has to be shown by the developed countries who have a higher rate of emission per capita, for them to educate us, the developing countries, on how they are able to manage it and how they can do it and bring down their level to the global average. So it's got to be by demo, by demonstration. I think all talk is not going to get us very much anywhere. And at the same time, I think to move sustainable, to become cleaner, we require money. Developing countries are challenged to do that. So really, it's the developed world, which has to unloosen their purse strings. After all, they are largely responsible for much of the global emissions. And much of the stuff that gives the emissions, the end product is supplied to the developed world anyway. So I think they should actually fund some of this, including the research on burning fuels cheaper and capturing emissions, like I said before.
Does it also become one of the biggest challenges in Bumi Resources?
It's certainly a priority for Bumi Resources. Now, we can't ourselves do much about it on our own, but definitely we will support moves which focus on R&D, on establishing cheaper technologies to burn fuels in a more economic way, in a healthier way. And it will be very much part of our integral part of the project, that whatever we have to burn or whatever we emit is somehow done in a clean way and can be captured. And it will be part of the project itself, so it will be part of the cost. So that is where the focus on our investment will be. But on our established ESG governance emission control programs, we are already doing a fair amount of work. Definitely, we will do far more than that.
Okay, back to Bumi Resources performance in 2023. Maybe you can talk about some of your initiatives or strategies and how that it can help Bumi last year.
Well, the market was very different in 2023 versus 2022. So we laid a lot of emphasis on the market. We found that market dynamics did show some change. So we had to be very alert in terms of what we do in the marketplace. But I think there were 2-3 things that really challenged us. One was that we had to maximize volume in an environment where price was falling, the coal price, where fuel prices remained high, margins were under pressure, levies were high. We had to make sure that somehow we could compensate through higher volume. So that is where our focus went, and our second focus was on how to preserve and make your working capital far more efficient. At the same time, we've initiated programs into injecting higher efficiency in our subsidiaries and units. We have gone in for IT, we've gone in for digitalization. We are looking at how we can electrify our diesel run fleets. We are using more biodiesel. And on some of our CSR projects, we are also initiated solar, we've initiated wind. We've done a bit of biomass as well.
What about layoff? Did you do a layoff also last
We have not done any layoff. Our production actually has increased. So we are very thankful to our highly committed employees that we've nurtured and cared for over the last 30 years, that they are contributing and will continue to contribute more. So no, I'm not aware of any layoff, and there is no intent to do that anyway.
So you think 2024, you still need to get more efficient?
2024, yes. We hope that the benefits of digitalization can kick in. Our volume can be higher. Our margins, can improve. We will do an optimal strip ratio management, which means how deep do we go to get the coal. So how much of earth do we remove to get a ton of coal? So we are trying to see how we can make it more economic. We have to move the overburden or the soil longer distances. We are trying to see how we can economize on those. We are factoring in more biodiesel. And we are hoping that maybe the wars that we have seen recently in East Europe and now in the Middle East, we hope if they ease off, then maybe the fuel prices can be a lot more manageable than at the high levels that they are. And definitely, we are hoping that the authorities will look kindlier at the levies that are imposed on IUPKs like ourselves. Like I said, 40% of what we generate as revenue goes back to the government by way of various levies, of which royalty is major. We hope that there can be a kinder look at the sector, and we hope there can be a more levelized playing field between IUPs and IUPKs and CCOWs.
Speaking of the war in the Middle East, did you see it give so much impact to the company?
We don't supply in those areas.
But for the coal
But
prices?
it doesn't really affect demand. What affects demand for us is what happens in Asia. Now, we have seen that China is increasing production. It is buying coal from Australia, and it has high inventory. India has increased production, and they have said publicly in the next 3-4 years, they may even stop importing coal. So whether it happens, whether it does not happen, we've got to take a note of that. So we think the market dynamics are changing, and we have to monitor them very carefully. So those can represent some of the challenges that we face. And the other challenge really is, which the market is looking for, is when do we announce our coal downstream project? When do we announce our new projects? We are hoping that we can do that sometime this year, as soon as everything is complete. Now, in short, those would be the 4 or 5 challenges. Now, as we look forward into the future, we've also got to look at in the transformation of Bumi as an organization from just a coal mining and a mining company into something far more. So our time and effort and strategy and mindset is also looking at how we transform the company. How do we want to position it? How do we get back investors? How can we get back to a dividend-paying capability?
Is that your biggest target in 2024?
Well, it's a priority, definitely. And we are hoping that we can make strides forward this year.
So what is the top priority for this year?
Volume. And if we can manage the weather, and if somehow we can get the price up, and hopefully the fuel price down, and maybe if the authorities can look kindlier on the levies they impose on us.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Mr. Dileep Srivastava, for being with us in Mining Zone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate your time.